all-time scare record. It doesn't make sense. During the events of Monsters, Inc., there's an energy crisis which is referenced multiple times throughout the film.
The energy crisis will only get worse.
Might be there's a screen shortage. We're walking.
But despite this, there are currently two monsters working on the same scare floor, being Randall and Sully, who are both on the verge of breaking this all-time scare record. And if you somehow don't understand what this means, it means that quite possibly the two greatest scarers of all time are currently working for Monsters Incorporated, but they still have a scream shortage. And do you want to know why? It's because the all-time scare record creates problems. How are you doing? Okay, so to start this video, I'm just going to tell you everything we know about the all-time scare record. When a monster scares a child, they fill up one of these scream canister things. Then they have a score on a leaderboard, which is boosted every time they scare someone. And depending on how loud the scream is, the more energy is produced, and the more their score rises. And the monster with the all-time highest score holds the all-time scare record. We know that Sully and Randall are both close to breaking this all-time scare record during the events of Monsters, Inc.
Another day like this and that scare record's in the bag.
And finally, from Monsters University, we are aware of two monsters that have held the all-time scare record in the past. Firstly, we have Dean Hartscrabble, who, according to Mike,
she broke the all-time scare record with a scream in that very can.
And secondly, we have Earl the Terror Thompson.
Look at that old feller racking up the big numbers.
Don, that old fella is Earl the Terror Thompson.
What? Where? That's really him?
He held the scare record for 3 years.
And that is everything we know. But here's the thing. When you start doing the maths behind the all-time scare record, a few things don't quite add up. You see what I did there? Maths add up. I'm sorry. Here's my question. How is Sully on the verge of breaking the all-time scare record at around 100,000 points, when according to my calculations, he should be getting at least 1,000 points per day? Okay, let me explain how I got to that conclusion. As shown in the film, Monsters Incorporated is made up of one big building and multiple small little buildings. The big building is, of course, the door factory, you know, where they keep the doors, because there are a lot of doors. And then you have the small little triangular-shaped buildings, which are the scare floors. Shown on screen, there are just under 50 scare floors at Monsters Incorporated. And you can trust me on that. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 39, 40, 41. Now there might be a few scare floors not shown on screen, so to account for that, I'm going to be assuming there are 50 scare floors at Monsters Inc., and that's the number I'm going to be using for my calculations. And on each scare floor there are 13 monsters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Sorry about the maths, I didn't want to be doing maths today either. Meaning 50 scare floors times 13 monsters working at each scare floor, there are a maximum of 650 monsters working at Monsters Incorporated. This is of course presuming that all the scare floors are in use, which I highly doubt, but yeah, I'll get back to that. What's important is that for the time being, we're going to assume that the maximum 650 scarers are working at Monsters Inc. And the fact that there are 650 scarers at Monsters Inc. is important because it means we can work out how many children each of these scarers scare per day. And on the day shown at the start of the film, Monsters Incorporated scared about 18,000 children in total. And if that feels like a lot, it's really not. 18,000 children divided by 650 scarers means every scarer only scares about 28 children per day. Personally, I thought that 28 was quite low because it's literally their job to go in and scare kids all day. And if they're working like an average 8-9 hour day, that's only 3 or 4 kids an hour. And while I do want to keep in mind that this day would have most likely been less than average because the whole George Sanderson 2319 sock incident occurred that day, causing Sully's scare floor to be closed for half an hour.
Okay, people, take a break. You gotta shut down for a half hour and reset the system.
Realistically, shutting off one scare floor out of 50 for about half an hour should affect that total by about 20-30 kids. Anyway, taking this all into consideration and working with this 28 kids per day, I'm going to work out the bare minimum Sully's score should go up by using the amount his score goes up by on the day we're shown in the film. So after the first scare Sully performs, his score rises from 99,479 to 99,513. Sully and Mike celebrate this, so we've got to assume that 34 is at least a decent scare. However, I really don't think it is. We see far inferior monsters perform significantly better scares than this. This spiky monster, who's called Augustus Jones, completed a scare worth 52 points. The monster with purple hair covering all his face, who's called Harry Lucky, completed a scare worth 61 points, and even Randall produced a scare worth 116 points. But what really makes me question if 34 is a good scare is that immediately after Randall's scare, Sully produces a scare that takes his score from 99,803 points to 100,021 points. That's 218 points with one scare. I don't even know what the standards are, and that's impressive. So just doing some basic maths and assuming that 218-point scare is like a rare, once-in-a-week kind of thing, and Sully's average scare is as low as like 40 points. Multiply that by 28 kids per day. That is 1,120 points per day. Meaning if my mathematical calculations are correct, and he is indeed close to the all-time scare record, at the current rate he is going, he could have broken it in 100 days. And that is bare minimum. Because when Mike, Sully, and the rest of Uzma Kappa go visit Monsters, Inc. during Monsters University, we can see that back then they scared 273,000 children in a day. That's 15 times as many as the day shown in Monsters, Inc. And because Sully's score is so high, you've got to assume he is scaring just as many, if not more kids as they did back then, meaning the only logical solution is that the majority of the scare floors aren't in use anymore. And if the majority of the scare floors aren't in use, that would mean that Sully could be racking up tens of thousands of points per day. Which just, how can Sully be on the verge of breaking the all-time scare record, as in all time, at such an alarming rate? This is just ridiculous when you consider there are old scarers who have been doing scaring their entire life and are still getting high scores. Dean Hartscrabble describes her all-time scare record breaking scare as
my one souvenir from a lifetime of scaring.
A lifetime! And Sully's seemingly broken it in a matter of days! This film is going to break me! I've spent a good part of the last week thinking about this. I've done nothing else, and I think I found a solution. What if the scores on the leaderboard reset every 100 days or so? Meaning the all-time scare record is the highest total achieved over 100 days. And at the start of Monsters, Inc., they were reaching the end of that 100 days, and Sully was a few thousand points away from the all-time scare record, so therefore he was close to breaking it. Now, I'm not saying it's exactly every 100 days, it could be every 30 days, it could be every week. It all depends on how many kids they scare per day, which unfortunately I just don't have enough information on. Like, love it or hate it, but this is a solution that genuinely makes sense. Because if the scores didn't have a time limit and did quite literally go on forever, don't you think Earl Tara Thompson, an old guy still racking in the big numbers, would set a record that would at least take Sully a few decades to break? However, when we get a glimpse at the scaring leaderboard during Monsters University, Thompson only has 36,000 points. There is no way Sully would have reached a score nearly 3 times as high while still a relatively young monster. It makes a lot more sense for this just to be an 100 or 30-day competition, and Earl Tara Thompson isn't even halfway through it yet. It makes so much more sense when you think about it, because he held the record for 3 years but then didn't have the record when he retired. What if he just kept trying to re-break the record for himself into his old age? It even helps explain Dean Hartscrabble's character arc. Because one thing I never quite understood was, why would the greatest scarer of all time stop scaring to become a dean at a university? Like, if she did hold the all-time scare record, why wouldn't she keep scaring into her old age like Earl Tara Thompson to keep the record for herself? She could have set an unbeatable record. Why was she willing to start teaching students with the potential to dethrone her? You know, unless she'd set the record a few years ago because it was on a time limit, and now she was well past her best and wasn't good enough to be a scarer anymore, decided to turn to teaching. And then in Monsters, Inc., the film itself, Randall and Sully are both at the top of their game and are close to breaking the all-time scare record with only a few days to go, and boom! It all makes sense. The all-time scare record is a competition between scarers to get the highest total scream points in the space of a specific time period. We don't know what this time period is, but I still think it's a great solution. However, it still doesn't explain one thing. Being, why is there an energy crisis when the 2 greatest scarers of all time are currently scaring? And while lots of people have tried to present solutions to this in theories before, I feel like the answer has been right in front of us this whole time. Because look no further than the scaring points leaderboard. As you can see on this leaderboard, there's a monster with 12,431 points. Which before today's theory, you'd have probably just assumed, he's a rookie, new to the scare floor. Of course he doesn't have as high a score as anyone else. But if you want to believe my theory to be true, which I hope you do, because I've spent way too long on this for you to tell me it's wrong, we have reason to believe he's been scaring for just as long as Sully or Randall or anyone on this board. So while Sully is getting thousands of points a day and bringing in bucket loads of energy to Monstropolis, or should I say canister loads? I'm sorry, I just want to apologize for that forced humor. No one deserves to be subject to something like that. The goal of my content is always to enter. This monster, whose name is Harley Gerson, is only producing a percentage of Sully's points. And when comparing it to the points leaderboard from Monsters University, the range of points from the person with the most and the person with the least is under 4,000 points. But in Monsters Inc., the range is nearly 90,000. Which just raises the question, how on earth did this guy get to become a professional scarer? But then, when you think about it, the same could be said for Thaddeus Bile, who, as you'll know, is the monster from the start of the film who attempts to scare a child simulator and fails atrociously. Are you seriously telling me he graduated from university? He forgot to close the door, and I imagine that is severely basic stuff. So my suggestion is that the education system for scarers has just dropped significantly in between the years of Monsters University and Monsters Inc., causing the standard of scaring from graduates to be severely lower than they used to be. Like, yeah, they do have some of the greatest monsters of all time working for them at the moment, but the majority are severely below par. This helps explain why there are scare floors presumably not in use because they just simply don't have enough scarers, why they were willing to employ unqualified scarers like Sully at the end of Monsters University. And finally, follow me on Instagram. I'm sorry, I didn't have a third point. And while I can't explain why the teaching levels have dropped in between the films, all the evidence is there for it. Right from the first scene in Monsters Inc., where a monster who is seemingly a scaring graduate forgets to shut a door when scaring someone and fails miserably, all the way to the last scene of Monsters University, where Mike and Sully get hired at Monsters Inc. without even having a degree.
You better believe it.
Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see another video by me similar to this one, you can check one out by clicking here. You can subscribe to my channel by clicking here. Make sure to go follow me on my other social medias in the description down below, including Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, and YouNow. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.